On the ATL Box Score podcast today, we are going off the beaten path from the way we usually set up our podcast, and today we are having our Sugar Bowl preview show. We're going to discuss the goings-on in New Orleans this week with Deandre Baker not playing, and the drama that continues to happen with Justin Fields and why this game is very important for the Bulldogs with their legacy. Then we have Mr. David Berger on to break down the Sugar Bowl even more, talk about Jake Fromm and Sam Ehlinger, how they have similar stats, get into why Tom Herman is very confident about this game, all that and much more. This is the ATL Box Score podcast with Alex Berger, and this is our Sugar Bowl preview show for 2018. Now, you guys might be wondering, how does a podcast that just recently started, what do I use for recording space? Well, I actually use a place called Spaces, and I go to the center that's Spaces Midtown East, and I use their resources that they have here to create my podcast and to put it out there to the world and to do other business-related things, and it's pretty much my home base to grow my business and my product that I'm developing for you guys. And if you want to check it out, I have Steve Choi with me, who is one of the regional managers who manages a lot of different centers also with Spaces and the Regis brand, to tell you more about Spaces Midtown East.
Hey, thanks, Alex, for inviting me on the show. We love having you as well as ATL Box Score with us here at Spaces. I want to invite anybody, all your listeners, to come in and take a test drive. Let us know that Alex sent you. We'll give you a free 5-day test drive to Spaces, which is a hybrid, collaborative, and private workspace location. We're all over the world, particularly here in Atlanta. We have 5 locations, and we'll be opening 2 more soon here. So I am the area manager. Come on in. We offer private offices as well as 8,000 square feet of collaborative space for our members to come in and check it and just be productive. So again, come on in. Let us know that Alex sent you and the ATL Box Score, and we'll go ahead and set you up for 5 days free.
Well, thank you, Steve. Definitely appreciate you. Definitely appreciate your friendly staff for helping me out and giving me all the resources I need to be successful. If you want to know more about Spaces Midtown, they are just a block north from the Fox Theater. I know all you guys know where the Fox Theater is. They're just a block north from the Fox Theater, and I'm going to put the website in the show description, so you have no excuses if you're like me, trying to start your own business or your own brand. Check out Spaces Midtown East. Welcome, friends, wherever you're listening to. Welcome to the ATL Box Score podcast with Alex Berger. This is our Sugar Bowl preview show. The funny thing about this business is that since this is a podcast, this is an on-demand medium that anyone can access, and you don't have to listen to this part if you don't want to, or you can. That's your choice, because it's an on-demand type of thing. And so I try to put out these shows in a timely manner, because these aren't accessible through live recording. So yesterday, we were planning on doing the show. Had David Berger on, which this is like a Thursday. And right now when we're recording this, this is a Friday on December 28th. So we had David Berger on, did his bit. Then I was like, well, I'll just do the intro to the show and talk about what I want to talk about. Which, researching the show, preparing to talk about the Sugar Bowl, not a lot of stuff was out there. I'll put it that way. Did find an interesting article on dognation.com. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But I came in prepared. And then just like that, it dropped. Deandre Baker is no longer going to be playing in the Sugar Bowl. Which, to me, doesn't necessarily surprise me, but we're going to get into that later. But this is just the nature of the business and what I do as someone trying to put together a podcast that is current, is try to put current information out there as much as possible, depending on when the time the podcast is released and when you, the listener, is listening. So I had this whole great spiel set up. And you heard the spiel, right, Steve?
I sure did.
This is Steve Choi, everyone.
Hello.
You gave me a good compliment after it, too.
Yeah. It was solid.
It was pretty solid. Now we have to do the darn thing all over again.
This is breaking news.
It was breaking news yesterday, but it's kind of like I would look like an idiot if I put out a podcast about the Sugar Bowl that's a very slanted to the Georgia side of the podcast, since this is our market here in Atlanta.
Right on.
And not mentioning that Deandre Baker. I was thinking about, honestly, because it was just so good that I was honestly thinking about just putting it at the end. Oh, by the way, this was our Sugar Bowl preview show. And by the way, Deandre Baker's not playing in the Sugar Bowl.
Nice.
Nice. So, with that being said, this is our Sugar Bowl preview show. And joining me in this segment, Steve Choi. I'm Alex Berger, and this is the ATL Box Score podcast. It's interesting. People don't really use podcasts anymore. I know you can, because you can use it in different mediums, but this is the ATL Box Score. I'll just put it that way.
It's awesome, buddy. Are you looking forward to the game?
I am. Now it's kind of seeming that it's like this thing is a little bit of a, these bowl games, unless it's not like the college football playoff, and I hate to say this, because a lot goes into it, that a lot of stuff goes into these games, and this is a big deal. But what they're turning out to be, since you only have two sites for playoff games, they're just turning into glorified, I hate to say this, exhibition games.
And I hate to say this because I know that you're not going to like this, but your comments are very similar to that of Nick Saban's. Have you heard his comment?
No, I haven't.
Oh, let me read you a quote. Well, essentially, they asked him what his thoughts were about expanding the college playoffs to eight teams or even more, right? And basically he was like, "That's ridiculous. I wasn't even in favor of it expanding to 4 teams." But basically, he said he was saying that essentially expanding the college football playoffs would disintegrate the bowls, would make them meaningless, and more players, like you're talking about, will stop playing in the meaningless bowls if their teams didn't make the playoffs. To skip it so that way they can concentrate on their prepping for their pro careers. Basically, Saban said, I'm not sure it's good for college football. I'm not really for going 8 teams in a playoff. It's a hypothetical question that I have enough issues and problems to solve without thinking about something that may or may not happen. And then he says he just thinks that it's going to disintegrate the bowl system. Kind of like what you're talking about. I mean, basically, it's glorified exhibition games because what skin in the game do they have now? So they win a bowl game, and it doesn't really mean anything except for bragging rights that you won, the Tostitos Bowl or something,
Right now, I guess trying to relate to the younger audience, right now these bowl games are kind of like Fortnite. Fortnite's really big right now.
Okay.
And there's a lot of money involved. But eventually, I hate to say this, but this is just reality. This is the truth. Eventually, Fortnite's going to go away. Eventually, people are going to get tired of Fortnite. And all that money that people invested in, they'll try to keep it relevant because it's Fortnite. They're making a lot of money off of it. But eventually, Fortnite will fade away because they'll become another game that's better, that's more popular, that more people want to play and more people want to have tournaments on. I've never played Fortnite. I know I kind of get what it's about. I'm kind of past that. I'm that little bit of an older generation that I remember James Bond GoldenEye.
Wow.
Yeah, that was that's kind of giving you where I'm at and kind of giving my age away. But that's essentially what these bowls are coming down to. Now, someone like the Sugar Bowl has been around for forever. And it's this thing that's made a lot of money for the city of New Orleans, has made a lot of money for Nokia and now Allstate and whoever else sponsored the Sugar Bowl.
Right.
But the only thing that's keeping it relevant is that every 4 years, it's a playoff
destination. Yeah, right.
And plus, too, it's a heck of a good time, from what I've heard.
Sure.
But, too, honestly, too, you have Georgia fans not really, and we're going to get more into this with David Berger, you have Georgia fans that aren't really interested in going to this game. And I hate to, and I'm going to put this out there for Dog Nation right now. If you have the money and the resources, go. If it was financially feasible for me, I would go. But unfortunately, it's not. I hope that we don't turn into a fan base that just wants to show up for the Rose Bowl and these games that only if they are playoff games that we want to show up for. I hope we don't turn into that fan base. Because one of the reasons why we got selected with the Sugar Bowl committee is because we were a fan base that will travel long distances to see our team. And that's the reputation that we got last year. And it looks like this year it's going to take a little bit of a hit, honestly. So I just hope we don't turn into one of these fan bases that will only go if it's a playoff destination game. That won't go if it's just a New Year. Because this is a New Year's Six bowl. It's one of these. I mean, yeah, I get it that these bowls too are kind of trying to leave your season on a high note if you win it. But it's a bowl game itself is just a game that congratulates you on a great season that you did, and you get to play in most likely a pro stadium and get all the gift baskets and the $500 Best Buy gift cards and the Fossil watches and everything. But that's pretty much what it's kind of boiled down to. That it's pretty much the only excitement is the bowl gifts, and now players aren't really excited about playing in the game. You know what I mean? So that just is what it is.
Well, personally, I think I think you're absolutely right. If you're a fan, you should go. You should support your team. It's probably going to be an awesome time regardless.
Right.
And I think we get into these situations where it's like, oh, it's not important unless it's March Madness or it's the Final Four, right? And
right.
It's like, no, it's actually it's important to go and support your team regardless. Because guess what? Without your support, they don't get to the places that you think they're at now. They have to start somewhere.
True.
So, you gotta have those fans support the team. It's good for morale. It's good for the team itself. It's good for the future prospects who look at the teams and they're like, oh, that's a team I want to go to because ride or die, those fans come out. I mean, even think about earlier this season when Nick Saban was complaining about how the students didn't even show up to that one game.
Yeah.
That sucks. I mean, it's like when you get so complacent that you're used to being number one and you're used to winning and you just don't show up. That's like not showing up to a Warriors game because they're playing the Hawks. Portland's a good, solid team. But like the Kings, Sacramento Kings.
That's better.
So like people are like, I'm probably gonna skip this game. Like, wow. Now, granted, they play 42 or 41 home games. That's a whole different story. But it's still ridiculous.
To your point too, it's like this is a sport that you only play 12 games.
Right.
You're lucky if you play a 13 one. You're lucky if you play 14 or 15.
Right.
So that's the sitch right now with the Sugar Bowl. We're going to talk more about Deandre Baker, Justin Fields drama, and why this is a dynasty situation for Georgia going to the Sugar Bowl. So now we're going to get into the state of Georgia football. Hey, that might be a segment we do from now on.
The state of Georgia football.
Or the state of so-and-so, state of Atlanta Hawks, state of Atlanta Braves, blah, 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 blah. Exactly. Thanks for the sound effects.
That's what I'm good at.
I know, buddy. I know. So, what we have here, the team flew out yesterday of Delta Airlines, which they always seem to get the hookup. Last year they got that big Boeing 747 or 748, one of those big planes, flew them out to Los Angeles. Now they get pretty much the same hookup they got last year, which I like. I think it's cool that the university now does these videos, and obviously they're geared towards high school kids that are considering going to Georgia and everything like that. They show how the team travels, which I thought was interesting, because I'm pretty sure that's on an 18-year-old's kid about, if I commit to this one school, I mean, I wonder what airline we're going to get. I hope we don't get Spirit Airlines.
Or have to bus it there.
Or had to bus it there.
Yeah.
No, they're probably thinking, kids nowadays like, man, I hope we don't have to go on Spirit Airlines.
Exactly.
I don't want to have to pay for a Powerade or anything. So we have the DeAndre Baker stuff shaking out. DeAndre Baker is not going to play in this game. And still, the Justin Fields thing still lingers over the program. You have an article that I saw basically saying Jake Fromm's not concerned about this, which he shouldn't be. And there's still stuff going on. But I have the transcripts on GeorgiaDogs.com about Kirby Smart and what's going on with Justin Fields. So here is Coach Smart on Justin Fields.
Q. Justin Fields was on the plane with you. Can you talk about his status? Also, just the trend in quarterbacks, for want of a better word, impatience about them wanting to start. Do you see this as an increasing trend in college football? Coach Smart, I don't think it's just impatience of quarterbacks wanting to start. I think every kid on that plane wants to start if you ask them. They all want that opportunity. The unfortunate thing about quarterback is only one of them can start. So it's not like where we have 6 defensive backs or 5 defensive backs or 4 defensive linemen. It's a very unique situation. But Justin has practiced with us throughout the bowl. He has done a really good job of focusing on that and worrying about that.
Well, that's good to hear. That I feel like Coach Smart answered that question in a very politically correct way, which I feel like in this situation you should answer a question like that in a very politically correct way. But it's good to know, too, and even Sean McAvoy alluded to this because Sean has been in a couple training sessions with Justin Fields, that Justin Fields is a very mature kid. So it's good to hear, and it's not totally surprising that Justin Fields is pretty much locked in and focused on beating Texas, which at the same time, which he should be. He should be worried about his free agency after this game on January 2nd. So I feel like this is going to put the end to the Justin Fields drama until after this game. I'm going to let the dust settle a little bit. And by the way, obviously that wasn't Coach Smart speaking. That was my MacBook Pro. In case you're wondering what the heck just happened. We're working on getting our stuff aligned, but at the same time we just got to laugh about these things and have a little humor to them. Because this is what happens when you're a startup podcast. But anyways, we digress and we move on to Mr. Deandre Baker. Whenever I hear Deandre Baker, I think there was a Florida running back who had the same name, and he was Deandre Baker, the touchdown maker. So I guess Deandre should be Deandre Baker, the interception maker.
True. Or if you're an Alabama fan, he's Deandre Faker for not playing.
They're playing Texas, buddy. Playing Texas, buddy. Which he had this year 2 interceptions and had a lot of solo tackles, by the way, buddy. Which
It's
I can't.
It's going to be good, man. It's
yeah.
It's going to be solid.
He's a good defensive back.
Cool.
And now that kind of leaves the question open for who's going to step up, which I feel like they have a lot of depth at that position. So, but speaking of Kirby Smart's press conference, we got the transcripts. Actually, Steve's going to read what Coach Smart had to say about Deandre Baker.
Deandre Baker's not going to play in this game. He has decided not to play in the game. That was a decision that he came to somewhere around midweek. But he was very honest about it, and he was very concerned about it. And we at the University of Georgia support him in this decision. It's a tough decision. When you look at it, he was forced to make it. He probably spoke prematurely when he was at the Thorpe Award. I think it was on his mind, but he met with his family about it. It was really important to him that he stay with the team. We support him as a coaching staff to stay around the team, be around the team. He wanted to come on this trip to help those other players, help the other corners. So it was a decision that he had to make. Look, across the country, there are a lot of guys that made that decision. And it weighed really heavily on that kid. He came to us and told us, and I told him we would support him. And he's here with us. He's part of our family. He came back after having a pretty good grade as a junior and decided to play. And he helped get us to this point, but he's not going to play in the game.
Well spoken by Mr. Smart. Good job reading, buddy.
Yeah, sorry I don't have that Kirby accent. You'd probably be better off doing that.
Let me see.
Yeah, give us some of that Kirby.
Let me get that quote back.
Give us some of that Kirby.
Let me get that quote back, though. Let me look at that.
Alex is sort of like an impressionist savant. He has all kinds of accents that he can pull out of his bag. His German accent is really awesome, too. But anyways, yeah, give us some Kirby, buddy.
Steve sells the office now. Sells the office now. Deandre Baker is not going to play in it. No, that's more like that's what got him out on. He's playing today. He's playing against Purdue. I'm a little worried about how Purdue always scored against Ohio State. A little worried about that one.
All right, so no Kirby today, huh?
I'm trying, buddy. I'm trying. You got to get in the thing. Here's the thing about impressions, though. Some impressions, especially Kirby Smart, because he has this like his Southern accent is that kind of it's very refined Southern accent.
Gotcha.
Because it's just not South Georgia. Or like Jimmy Conn, Plains, Georgia. But it's Bainbridge.
Okay.
It's just Bainbridge, Georgia.
Digging it.
So Deandre Baker. Deandre Baker is not going to play in this game. There you go. Okay.
Oh, nice.
That probably wasn't it, but we'll get you, I'll get you a Kirby eventually.
All right. We're going to hold you to that.
Okay. Hey, as long as we have fun today, folks. But yes, before I get sidetracked, my thoughts on this thing. Well, first of all, with that statement by Kirby Smart about Deandre Baker, I'm glad that Georgia's supporting him because in the olden days, I don't think people they weren't really too high on this NFL stuff and everything like that. But that just shows the integrity that the University of Georgia has. Because they could be like, okay, you don't want to play in this game. Okay, well, you want to go on this trip. So you want to reap the rewards of the bowl, but you don't want to play in the game. So, but at the same time, Deandre Baker, like Kirby said, he got the team to this point. So I'm glad that Georgia's letting him go on the 747 with those like seat portal things that you see on nice airplanes nowadays, and probably staying at like the Sheridan in downtown New Orleans or the downtown Marriott in New Orleans, and getting the whole carpet treatment and showing up to the Sugar Bowl for free. So I'm glad that the university is letting him do that, and that they support his decision. Because at the same time, I honestly have a middle-of-the-road opinion. I get at this point in his career that every decision he makes is a business decision. Because that's what it is. It's a business decision because he is taking the next steps for a career. Yes, this is a career move right now. It's kind of like probably one of the reasons why you didn't take a certain class in college, or you didn't do a certain thing in your college career that you had an opportunity to do, but because of certain limitations or maybe a setback or here or there, or you wouldn't be able to graduate on time, you decided not to do this. This is the same type of decision, guys, that he's making. He could play in the Sugar Bowl, but he doesn't want to because of injury reasons. So I get that. I somewhat respect that. But at the same time, maybe this is just being a white male. I would like to see him play. I would like to see him cover Texas's corners. I mean, cover their wide receivers. I think corners because he's a corner. Because they have some explosive wideouts. But another positive thing to take away from this, you have guys like D'Angelo Gibbs, who was highly recruited coming out of Grayson. You get to see his skill set. You get to see more of Richard LeCount got significant playing time, but you get to see what type of player Richard LeCount is going to turn into. You get to see how Eric Stokes does now that you have your main guy out. The guy who's replacing him is Mark Webb, who is a 6'1", 200-pound sophomore. So you get to see how the secondary steps up. You get to see how guys are going to take on different roles because, yeah, those guys that I mentioned, D'Angelo Gibbs, Eric Stokes, they're not playing his position, but now your game plan kind of changes, and now you have to shift coverages and do an entirely different game plan, so to speak. I'm pretty sure they're prepared for this. So I think too as people in my disposition kind of sit back and think, well, it's like, man, he should be more of a team player. This shouldn't be all about himself. Well, yeah, it kind of is about himself, but at the same time, it's kind of like you have so much money on the line and that this is an opportunity that he's getting. That I don't know what the area of Miami where Deandre Baker comes from. I don't really want to speculate on that. But this is an opportunity that he can improve his quality of life if that is where he came out of, he grew up in. So I am disappointed he's not playing. I am disappointed that he's not going to help Georgia to a victory. And I'm wondering about this secondary situation. But at the same time, I don't fault him for doing this. I think it's probably a good move, but I hope this doesn't become the trend in college football for these type of bowl games because you have someone like Will Greer who's not participating in his game. His bowl game that they're playing against Syracuse today. But at the same time, I hope Deandre Baker goes in the first round of the draft, which he should. But now it's kind of like, I hope he goes in that, doesn't get bumped down to the second round. I mean, at the same time, too, at this point, all these NFL GMs he has enough film for NFL GMs. And he'll be ready for the combine and for his pro day. So, here at the ATL Box Score, we wish the best of luck to Deandre Baker and the Georgia Bulldogs going into the Sugar Bowl. This is the state of Georgia football. Now we're going to have David Berger on to talk more about this Sugar Bowl matchup. This is the ATL Box Score with Alex Berger. Now we just want to welcome to the ATL Box Score hotline for the Sugar Bowl preview show, Mr. David Berger. I had David on my most recent episode, the Christmas episode that I did to talk about bowls. Now we're specifically talking about the All-State Sugar Bowl, and we'll get in a little bit of talk about the playoffs, get his thoughts on that, but mainly we're just going to focus on the Sugar Bowl. David, how are you doing today, man?
I'm pretty good. Not too bad. How about yourself?
I'm great. Did you get a Santa Claus sighting up there in the North Georgia mountains this Christmas?
Yeah, I guess so. I guess we did. We had a lot of family in town, so that was a good thing to have. But, most of all, Christmas went pretty well, so can't complain.
Good. Well, down here in Midtown, we're trying to look for a Jim Harbaugh sighting, but we haven't found him yet.
Yeah, Jim Harbaugh, Santa Claus, sometimes usually confused about the same person. But, they usually bring gifts, just not against rival opponents. So
Right. And I guess you could probably put Dan Mullen in that same category, too.
Yeah, for real.
So, obviously, with the Sugar Bowl happening in New Orleans, Georgia was known for last year that they would travel no matter where their team played because playing in places like Notre Dame, Pasadena, California for the Rose Bowl. But now I look on StubHub today, and there are a lot of tickets available. You texted me this during the before Christmas that behind the Georgia bench is about $100. Right now, it is $30. Well, the price went up from this morning. This morning it was $30. Now it's $50 just to get into the lower deck. I mean, the upper deck. Excuse me.
Now on other secondary market websites like Ticket City, SeatGeek, for example, some of them are showing as low as $25 a ticket, and that's just the get in the door price. And if you want to sit behind your team's bench, it's probably going to be around anywhere from $100 to $125 a ticket, which isn't bad. Lower level in the Superdome's pretty good view from what I've heard. But yeah, this is pretty low for a BCS game. This is pretty low for a New Year's Six game. But it's also interesting looking at the ticket prices for the Orange Bowl, Oklahoma, Alabama in Miami. That's $64 to get in the door. And then Notre Dame, Clemson in the Cotton Bowl, it's $110 to get in the door. But $25 for the Sugar Bowl. I mean, Georgia's averaging on the secondary market this season, or averaged ticket prices on that secondary market, depending on the game and depending on the opponent, were anywhere from about $80 to $120 just to get in the door. Just to get in the stadium. So to see a Sugar Bowl at starting at $25 just to get in the game, that's pretty good. But I think that goes to show you that both teams lost their conference championship game. Texas 9-4 comes in at number 15 in the nation, reeling off the loss to not only in the Big 12 title game, but also to their biggest rival in Oklahoma. And then Georgia comes in, losing the way they did against Alabama. Alabama, again, had to come back from behind against Georgia and beat them in the fourth quarter. But Georgia comes in 11-2, number 5 in the nation. So I don't think a lot of fans are really encouraged to make that drive. Austin to New Orleans is probably about 4 to 5 hours. And then Atlanta to New Orleans is about 8.5 hours. So it's a long drive or a short flight, no matter which way you dice it up. But at the same time, I think a lot of these fans are kind of just wanting to stay at home and watch this. It's also an 8:45 kickoff on New Year's Day. So, hotels are going to be kind of expensive down in New Orleans, especially in and around the French Quarter. So I think a lot of fans are just choosing to kind of stay home and watch this. I wouldn't be surprised if the game wasn't sold out. But Georgia has always traveled very well. I won't be surprised if the majority of the fans there are Georgia fans. I also wouldn't be surprised because Texas is obviously a border state to Louisiana, that there's a lot of Texas fans there. So who knows? Maybe the game will be sold out. But as it looks right now, it doesn't look like it's going to be a big sellout. And it's kind of surprising because Georgia's played in a lot of Sugar Bowls in the past, and they have a good history down there. Their last national championship in 1980 came against Notre Dame in the Sugar Bowl. Mark Richt's first big game in 2002 after the 2002 SEC championship was the Sugar Bowl against Florida State. So Georgia has a good history down there. The last time they were down there, they absolutely decimated a very extremely overrated Hawaii team. Now, granted, They were undefeated going into the game, but again, it was one of those, they had never seen SEC speed before, and they got their doors blown off, losing 41-10 down in New Orleans for that Sugar Bowl in 2008. So Georgia, both teams are going to come in a little bit limping off their conference championship games, but yeah, overall, I think Georgia fans will show up, but probably not as much as you would think normally in another bowl game.
Right.
Yeah, it's not going to be like the Rose Bowl, I'll tell you that.
To quote Alf, the TV show back in the 80s, probably the most friendliest alien in the 80s on TV, pretty much with Georgia fans with this Sugar Bowl experience, because they've had recent history in there, what you pretty much said is that they've been there, done that, and thrown up.
Yep.
And it just like you said, it just doesn't seem like a big selling point, because a lot of Georgia people and a lot of national spectators out there believe that the Dogs should be in the playoff. But you said something interesting in the last podcast, that talking on the field, not just from fan support, that this should be the most angriest Georgia team that Texas is probably going to face. Why did you speculate that?
Well, just the way they lost the SEC championship game, and just the fact that they were, basically, just a couple plays away from the playoff for the second year in a row and back-to-back SEC titles. So I think Georgia just comes in, just a little bit more angry than Texas. I mean, Texas, is probably ticked off that they lost the Big 12 title game to their arch rival, Oklahoma. But Oklahoma kind of came back a little bit in the late first half. But for the most part, Oklahoma was kind of leading for the majority of the game, and in the second half just kind of pulled away. Georgia, had almost a 2-3 touchdown lead on Alabama at one point. And I mean, it could have gone totally Georgia's way. And then, Tua gets hurt. He's having a terrible game. So they bring in Jalen Hurts and that, miracle story of him coming back in the same place that he, was benched in the national championship game the year before. And, just all that aura around Alabama, and just that aura around that whole story of Jalen getting benched in the national championship and then has a second chance to come back in the SEC championship when Tua got hurt. So I think Georgia just has, I guess, a little bit more of an emotional downside coming out of Atlanta rather than when Texas came losing out of Dallas. So I just see it as Georgia's going to come in. It reminds me a lot of the 2012 SEC championship game where they had a lead against Alabama, lost it in the end, lost the game on the last play. And Todd Gurley was quoted as saying after that game, he said, yeah, whoever we get in the bowl game, they're going to get a very angry Georgia team. And just knowing what Kirby Smart and how he operates and what he says to his guys, I can totally tell them that. I can totally agree and totally see how Kirby could use losing in the SEC championship game as a little bit of motivation and saying, you guys got to go out there and prove that you can be better than what you left yourself on the field in the SEC championship game. So I think that'll go into a little bit more of emotion. And I just feel like in terms of, the better team, I think Georgia overall is the better team compared to Texas. And just with that little, mentality of how they're ticked off from the SEC championship and the way it ended, they want to send the seniors out on a good note. They want to send everybody, just end the season on a great note by beating a pretty solid program in Texas.
Right. Right now, Vegas has the Bulldogs at 13 in this matchup. Now, with that, the SEC teams in this game, when this bowl game hasn't been relevant, hasn't been a playoff game, or hasn't been a national championship game, you had the Gators back in 2013 lose pretty handily to Louisville. And then you had Alabama, granted Nick Saban Alabama team, lose pretty handily to Oklahoma. Do you feel like Georgia could possibly fall into that this game really doesn't matter? What we wanted to achieve at the end of the year hasn't happened, so we don't really care, and we're just going to get ready for next year.
Well, here's the thing about those two games that you brought up. The Oklahoma-Alabama game, Oklahoma came into that game, into that Sugar Bowl, on fire, ready to pull that upset, and Alabama came into that game like they could care less about football. So if Georgia comes into the game like they could care less and like they're just going through the motions, yeah, Texas will probably beat them. But if Georgia comes in focused, ready to win a game and ready to play one last game to end this 2018 season off on a good note, then Georgia should win. And then the Louisville-Florida game, Florida kind of came in the same way. Florida kind of came in and just said, all we got to do is just show up and we can beat Louisville. And Louisville said, well, we got this kid named Teddy Bridgewater who hasn't really showed up or hasn't really shown out this year, and we're just going to let him do his thing. And they just played very loose. They played had a very fluid offense, and they just let Teddy do his thing. And so TB5 went out there and he just threw the ball all over the yard. And Florida was just kind of looking around saying, all right, so when are we gonna buckle down and win this thing? And they never did. Florida just kind of like looked around at each other and just said, they kind of went through the motions a little bit too. They just thought that they could just waltz in there and just say, we're the bigger, better team. And Louisville just said, you know what? We are the underdog. And so we got to just play out of our mind. And that's exactly what they did. At the same time, though, Texas comes into this game a little bit better than Louisville did in that regard.
Right.
And in all honesty, Kirby Smart teams have always been more focused than Will Muschamp teams. And you can even see that in the recent history of Kirby's gone 3-0 against Muschamp. So at the same time, I think Georgia's going to be a little bit more focused than that Florida team. But you never know. I mean, Texas does have the weapons to do it. Ellinger is a very good quarterback. He can run, or he can scramble pretty well. He's a big kid. He can throw it 60 yards on a dime. So Georgia's got to be prepared. They can't come into it just thinking that they're going to win. They got to show up and play first, and they also have to play hard. They have to play like they've been doing all season. And if they play like they've been doing all season, then it could be a long day for Texas.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Now, speaking of, it might be a long day for Texas. You said something recently in the last podcast. Again, I'm referring back to that when you talked about the Sugar Bowl a little bit. I just want you to expand on this because I haven't seen anything, and I've actually researched this game this week. To be honest, it was one of those things where I had so many other things going on that the Sugar Bowl was just in the back of my mind. But now that it's like I'm looking at all the headlines, looking at all the comparisons, and it hasn't been as much written like it was about the Rose Bowl, which I can understand why. But you brought up that Tom Herman actually had some things to say or felt pretty confident in their defense going up against Georgia's run game. Can you just expand on those comments?
Yeah, well, Herman had said earlier before Christmas, he had said that, they're not really worried about Georgia's running game. And Georgia's running game has been very good this year. They've been very well balanced with DeAndre Swift and Elijah Holyfield taking most of the carries this season. So Georgia's running game is one of the best in the nation. Georgia's offensive line is one of the best in the nation. But at the same time, it was funny. Herman had said, "Oh yeah, we're not worried about it," which is good to have that confidence. But then he brought up comparisons to. He's like, "Well, we've played Oklahoma," and I was like, "Okay, yeah, Oklahoma's got some really, really good backs. Don't get me wrong.
Right.
Not necessarily as good as Georgia, but still, at the same time, Oklahoma pretty solid. Oklahoma's offensive line is up there with Georgia. Oklahoma and Georgia are in the top 3 best offensive lines in the nation by a long shot. Those are probably the 2 best that you'll see, Oklahoma, Georgia, and Alabama in terms of offensive lines in this country. So that's a good comparison. All right, decent, respectable. And then he brings up, well, we also played Kansas, and Kansas had a good running game. Dog, Kansas went like 3-9 this year. Probably maybe I think 4-8. So he's going to compare it to Kansas.
And they're hiring honorable grass eater.
Yeah, exactly. A team that fired their coach in the middle of the season and then brings in Les Miles, before Thanksgiving. I mean, Kansas of all teams. So it's just kind of like, all right, if you want to compare it to Big 12 team, then go right ahead. Do it. That's fine. But this is also the same Texas team that lost to Maryland in the first week of the season. So, take it with a grain of salt. If Herman doesn't want to, give the respect that Georgia's running game deserves, so be it. I think Georgia will just take that and use that as bulletin board material going into the week, and rightfully so, because Kansas and Georgia are light years apart.
Right.
Light years apart. So, I mean, he can say all that he wants to, but at the same time, he's still got to put up guys to try to stop Elijah Holyfield, DeAndre Swift, Brian Herrien, James Cook. And then he's also got to worry about the passing game from Georgia, especially with Riley Ridley, J.J. Holloman, Isaac Nauta. I mean, the list goes on and on. So Oklahoma is the closest team that Texas has played that resembles Georgia. And it took a couple, lucky plays for them to beat them in the regular season. And then they just slowly and methodically got beat in the championship game a couple weeks ago. So I think it'll be a good matchup for Texas. It'll be one of the toughest matchups they've had all year. But at the same time, for Georgia's defense, I mean, outside of Oklahoma, they haven't seen speed like Georgia has. And in terms of defenses, this will be the best defense Texas plays. So with that said, Texas is going to have their hands full a little bit.
Well, speaking of defenses, I saw film on Texas's defense, and they got a great edge rusher in Gary Johnson. And also, too, they have super athletic corners like Chris Boyd and Caleb Stearns. I might have got that last name wrong, but that's going to be interesting matchup because obviously Boyd and Caleb, one of them is going to cover Terry Godwin, then the other one's going to cover Riley Ridley. How do you feel like the on-the-play stuff is going to shake out?
I think at the end of the day, Georgia has the better athletes overall, and I think at the end of the day that Georgia's going to be able to control the game in the second half. I think it's going to be a lot like the Florida game from earlier in the season. Georgia, it'll be close. for a while, but I think in the second half, that's when Georgia can start to pull away and make those plays on defense, especially coming out of halftime, making halftime adjustments, no matter if they're winning or losing. But I also think that Georgia, it's not like they've gone up against teams that, like it's not like Texas is astronomically better than the defenses Georgia's faced. They did very well against an Auburn team and just kind of methodically beat Auburn. They did very well against Alabama in the SEC championship game. There's a couple questionable calls, but overall, Georgia did very well against the Tide. And that's probably the best defense one of the best defenses in the nation. So Georgia's played pretty well. They handled a very, very good defensive line at Florida and a good defensive front seven at Florida. So from what I've seen just in the tape with Georgia and the few games here and there that I've watched of Texas, Georgia can hang with Texas. Texas can score on Georgia, that's for sure. But Georgia can not only hang with them, Georgia can beat them. So I'm pretty confident in taking Georgia in this game.
The one player that does have me concerned on their defensive side of the ball for Texas is that Gary Johnson, because I feel like during the SEC championship game, you didn't see a lot of it from Alabama, and still Georgia offensively had a very successful day. They just didn't win the game. But I know Georgia's gone through a lot of growth since the LSU game, but this is going to be an off the edge pass rusher, kind of like the Renzo Carter for Georgia people to kind of be familiar with that type of pass rusher that Gary Johnson is, and Georgia hasn't seen this since the LSU game.
Yeah, but Georgia's a completely different team since that LSU game.
Right, exactly. They've grown and matured since that game.
Yeah, that trip to Baton Rouge was kind of a wake-up call, I feel like, for Kirby and his guys, and I think they've learned a lot since then. So even then, LSU, one of the best, again, another great, not just SEC defense, but defense in general that Georgia's gone up against. And I think, yes, they lost by 20 to LSU, but at the same time, I think Georgia learned a lot in that game and will take that, take what they've learned even since then. And they've really changed a lot since that trip to Baton Rouge. They had the week off after that, and then they went down to Florida, put up big numbers against Florida, especially in the second half, and then really turned on the Jets for the rest of the year. They beat a good Kentucky team in Lexington. They did well against Georgia Tech, well against Auburn at the end of the season, and then, held their own against Alabama for a very long part of that game in the SEC championship. So I think Georgia has had the tougher schedule. I think just playing in the SEC, I think Georgia has had, a couple bumps along the way that have really shaped them into what they are today, and that's a pretty solid group. They're ranked number 5 in the nation. I mean, they're ranked higher as a 2-loss team than 1-loss Ohio State that won their conference title game. So, what can you say about it? The one thing you can say about it is that I think Georgia just overall has more experience against tough teams, and the better depth I think will show. And I think, it may be close in the beginning, but I think Georgia pulls away in the end and wins it pretty big. I think they can win. I think Georgia wins it like 34-17. That's what I'm going with.
34-17. There you go. Do you feel like, because obviously what Oklahoma did, and they're completely different offenses, but still these Big 12 offenses can strike very quickly. Do you think that that's going to be Texas's strategy going into this game, that they're going to try to do what Oklahoma did last year in the Rose Bowl, just try to put as many points as they can on the board in the first half?
Yeah, well, that's kind of a strategy for anybody, but at the same time, with the Big 12 offenses that Texas faces, that's going to be their goal, is to try to, score as quickly as possible. But Georgia's goal, kind of like last year's Rose Bowl, they got to slow it down. When they slow it down, that's when Georgia did very well. Or when they slowed it down against Oklahoma, that's when Georgia did very well. And that's when Georgia started to play well in the second half. So they got to, shorten the tempo and slow down Texas's attack. And if they can do that, if they can make the Longhorns, cause incompletions and make them slow down their drive, I think Georgia has a good chance. Now, I think Texas will be successful a couple times with it, but at the same time, I think Georgia's defense, and especially in the passing game with Deandre Baker, DeAndre's shutting down one side of that field. So with that said, I think Texas will have kind of a more difficult time than they usually have had against certain Big 12 teams. But at the same time, if Georgia doesn't slow down that offense, it could be a long day for the Dogs down in New Orleans.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Because during the Big 12 championship game, Texas went up by 7 points in the first half, and Oklahoma had to come back. But Texas didn't seem like their defense couldn't really handle an athletic quarterback. So let me ask you this. Even though that there's kind of drama with Justin Fields, do you feel like Chaney will play Justin Fields at all? Or do you think since that he's going to move on, that most likely they'll probably just bench him for this game because he has practiced and has prepared to play in the Sugar Bowl game?
Well, if he's practiced and prepared for it, I wouldn't see why not. I think they will work him in like they have before, just to switch things up like they've done in the past. Which I think some fans will riot about because they're saying, well, if he's going to transfer, why is he even playing? they'll say stuff like that. But at the same time, he's still part of the team. He also hasn't even declared if he's transferring or not. So at the same time, I'm like, if he still technically hasn't prepared to transfer or hasn't declared, he's still technically a part of the team. So in terms of football, I would prepare as if he's playing. Yeah, I definitely. And you know what? If I'm Chaney, I'm giving him the reps too. I'm going to let him do it until he says he's not playing. I let him play. So, and fans will get mad, but who cares? They're not the coach. So at the same time, I'm like, he's part of the team. Might as well make him part of the game plan as well. So.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And it's interesting too, talking about the quarterback situation. Just in general, I saw an article that got released from the AJC that shows Jake Fromm and Sam Ehlinger's stats, and they're pretty much similar outside of passing yardage, but touchdown to interception ratio is very interesting. Fromm has 27 touchdown passes with 5 interceptions. Ehlinger has 25 touchdown passes to 5 interceptions.
Yeah, I mean, it just goes to show you that, Texas is more pass-heavy and more pass-based, and that just comes with, their offense. But at the same time, Ehlinger's a pretty solid quarterback. He's done a lot of good things for Texas this year. The Oklahoma game was, I think, a big coming-out party for him. He's been battling through injuries throughout his career at Texas, and even this year a little bit as well. But, he's got a pretty good arm. Again, like he can throw it about 60 yards on a dime. He's got great receivers there at Texas, but they are more of a passing-based team. Georgia's going to look more balanced on the stat sheet just because they pass and run almost about the same. There's been a couple games this year where their passing yards and rushing yards have been pretty much the same, or their number of passing plays versus number of rushing plays pretty much 50-50. So Georgia's going to look at times a little bit more run-heavy. That's because they do run it more. But at the same time, both offenses are pretty effective in what they do and have been pretty effective against the defenses they've played this year.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Very interesting stuff. Appreciate that analyst right there. Let's kind of switch gears right now. What are your thoughts on the college football playoff?
I think it'll be a good playoff this year. Having an undefeated Notre Dame team in there always makes it a little interesting because Notre Dame, doesn't play in a conference. They don't have a conference championship game. So I think that for the most part, the Clemson Notre Dame game will be the closest game, especially with Dexter Lawrence not making the trip over because of a failed drug test. So that puts a little bit of a wrinkle into Clemson's defense, but they're all about the next man up. So they're prepared for it, and they've been preparing for, situations like this all season. So Clemson will be the toughest team Notre Dame has played all year, and Notre Dame will be the toughest team Clemson's played all year. I think that one will be the closer of the two games. I think also that one will be the least, in my opinion, won't be as high scoring. I think Alabama-Oklahoma will be more high scoring, but I think Alabama will do its thing. And I think Alabama will win by about 2 or 3 touchdowns down in Miami in the Orange Bowl. That game I could see being like something, like 52-35, something around there. Maybe like 45-28, 45-21, something like that. But overall, I think, again, Alabama-Oklahoma will be more high scoring. But I think Clemson-Notre Dame will be the better of the 2 games. I think it'll be the closer of the 2 games. And I think overall, at the end of it, it's going to be Clemson and Alabama playing for the national championship, are playing in the playoff against each other for the 4th year in a row. So that's my take on it. Is I'm taking Clemson, I'm taking Alabama to meet in Santa Clara on January 7th.
Mm-hmm. Now, one of the things that's kind of been talked about with the playoff, and especially where Georgia's at right now, is that if Alabama beats Oklahoma pretty handily and Georgia beats Texas pretty handily, there's going to be a lot of people out there that think that Georgia should have been in that playoff spot, especially the way they played in the SEC championship game. I just want to get your thoughts on that.
Well, you can't really play the coulda, woulda, shoulda game at this point. What's done is done, and the committee can't predict the future. They can't say, oh, well, if we don't take Georgia in there, Georgia's going to absolutely roll in their bowl game. And if we put Oklahoma in there, Oklahoma's going to get steamrolled by Alabama. They can't make that call. They can't predict the future. So, with that said, the committee just puts what they feel at that time is the 4 best teams in college football. And, winning your conference championship has a lot to do with it. Now we've seen in the past where it doesn't make a big deal. Ohio State got in, 2 or 3 years ago when they hadn't won the Big Ten, and Penn State did, and Penn State got snubbed. And then last year when Georgia won the SEC championship and Alabama didn't even play in it, and Alabama still made it as the 4th seed. So, you can't really say, and you can't go into it, with they should have done this, they should have done that, especially after the games have been played. But I think in the future, there's going to be people that no matter who wins, no matter if Oklahoma pulls the upset and it's Oklahoma-Notre Dame in the national championship, somebody's going to say, oh, well, Georgia would have given Notre Dame a better game than Clemson did, even if it's a 1-point game. There's still going to be people that'll say that. And, then if, the favorites win, if Clemson and Alabama win out, there's still going to be people that'll say, oh, well, Georgia would have given Clemson a better game. There's always going to be people that'll say that. You're always going to have people that'll say, well, Oklahoma shouldn't have been in for whatever reason. Their defense is trash, like we all knew it was. So you're always going to have that. But at the same time, you just can't look to that and just say, oh, that's the reason why, we should expand the playoff, or that's the reason why Georgia should have been in. You got to take there's so many other factors that go into this that just it's stupid to play that game because you just keep talking in circles, almost like I'm doing now.
Right.
And nothing ever gets accomplished. And so, people are going to say, no matter who's in or who's not in, there should be 8 teams. There should be an 8-team playoff. There's always going to be people that'll say, well, that number 5 team or number 6 team, they should have been in over, X, Y, or Z team. So that's always going to happen. And that's you just got to kind of just throw that and just say, hey, that stuff's for the birds, just move on with. Just move on with it, move on with life, because playing that shoulda, woulda, coulda game, we've seen year in, year out that doesn't do anything in college football. That doesn't solve any of the problems that people say there are in the sport, which, in all honesty, with this 4-game playoff, you expand it to 8, there's going to be teams that get left out. Those 9 and 10 teams that get left out. And then doing the automatic qualifiers, this is not the NCAA basketball tournament. If this goes to automatic qualifiers, then you might as well just give, that's everybody gets a prize. That's that, whole everybody gets a trophy mentality. It's like, no, you got to be able to hold your own and fight hard and not just, going from the Pac-12 and be an 8-4 team in the Pac-12 that wins and say, yeah, we made the playoff. We may be one of the worst teams in college football that won their conference title game, but hey, we made the playoff. No, that's not how it should be. It should just be the 4 best teams at the time. Was Georgia one of those, a month ago? Maybe, but they didn't win the championship game. They didn't win their conference championship. Oklahoma did. Oklahoma's in it. Georgia fans just have to live with it. And Georgia fans just have to live with hoping for the fact that they show up and play a darn good Sugar Bowl against a really good Texas team.
Do you feel like Oklahoma is – do you feel like they have a shot at all to beat Alabama? Because obviously they had a shot last year to beat Georgia, and they pretty much positioned themselves in a position to win that game and just couldn't win it. Now – obviously, this is a different team and everything like that, but I just want to get your thoughts. Do you feel like Oklahoma has a shot, or do you feel like just Alabama is just gonna destroy them with the depth that they have?
Yeah, I think Oklahoma's got a shot. I mean, Georgia had a good shot against Alabama. Georgia was up pretty big. I think I think Oklahoma could be up pretty big on Alabama. But again, Alex, it just comes down to, how hard these teams show up. Now, a lot of people said last year that Clemson would do really well against Alabama, and Alabama's defense just shut Clemson down. Simply put, Alabama's offense really struggled last year, but now the tables have turned a little bit. Alabama's offense is pretty good. So I think, it's going to be one of those situations where which defense can keep up in this game. I think both offenses can score, and I think both offenses can score a lot. So I think this game's going to get down to defense. I think Oklahoma can score against Alabama, and I think they will. I think they'll put up some big points. I think they'll put up double digits. I think they'll do some stuff that Georgia did and be successful at it. But at the same time, is Alabama going to be able to stop Oklahoma? And is Oklahoma going to be able to stop Alabama? And I think at the end of the day, I think Alabama is going to stop Oklahoma before Oklahoma stops Alabama. And so I think that's what it's going to get down to, is the fact that, the Sooners are going to struggle more on defense than Alabama will. And again, defense, offense puts up points, defense wins championships. And I think this defense and that Alabama defense wins the Orange Bowl and puts the Tide back in the national title game.
Now, just to end up this conversation, I just want to get your thoughts on this last thing, and maybe this thing isn't irrelevant at all, but I'll just put this out there. This is the first bowl game since 2011 that Texas is actually going to travel outside of the state of Texas for a bowl game. And now this Georgia team has a lot of experience playing in these big-time bowls because of what happened last year. Do you feel like that's an advantage at all to Georgia, or it's not going to matter come game day?
I'll say yes and no. Yeah, just because Georgia's team, has a lot of depth. They've had a lot of people that have played the past 2 years that have played, at Notre Dame, in the Rose Bowl, in the national championship in Atlanta, the two SEC championships, and they've traveled all over. But, Texas is a very storied program. And Texas, Louisiana is a closer drive than, for Texas than Louisiana is a drive for Georgia. So I'll say, yeah, it helps because the team's used to it, but it's not going to make a difference come game day. I think it's just going to be whichever team shows up the best and wants to play the hardest, and whichever team hits and scores the most, hits more and scores the most is the team that's going to win. And so I think it helps Georgia to a certain degree of saying, hey, we've been there, done that. This is just another big game on another big stage. But at the same time, I don't think it gives them much of an advantage. And I think just come game day, the team that's going to win is the team that's most prepared. So, it's just simply put.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's the adage in football, that the most prepared team, most disciplined team will always win the day. I just want to thank you, David, for coming on the show today and giving your thoughts about the Sugar Bowl and a little bit about college football playoffs. And where can we reach you at on social media if we have any questions or have any thoughts we want to share with you about this conversation?
Yeah, Twitter's the best place, at Coach D Berger. So just hit the mentions up on Twitter.
All right. Well, thank you, David, and go Dogs, and hopefully we can get a good Sugar Bowl win come January 1st. 2nd. Yeah, yep. January 1st, yeah. I got those tripped up, but yeah, go Dogs.
That's right. Go Dogs.
Go Dogs. Well, thank you, David.
Yeah, sure, man.
I feel like I just mentioned this just to mention this since we cover Atlanta sports, that it was disheartening. I feel like that's the most appropriate word, to see Georgia Tech just get destroyed. Or just, it wasn't just they didn't get destroyed. They got more like they got smacked around. I feel like is a more appropriate term by Minnesota. So, but that Paul Johnson has done a lot for college football. Not on like the big stages of college football, like he was never Ohio State's coach or Michigan or at a school that won a national championship. But he did more for schools like Navy and Georgia Southern. And then he took that success and went to Georgia Tech. So I felt, and I feel like ESPN kind of did it justice when, like, at the end of the game, the cameras immediately went to him. I would have liked to seen, maybe this a little far-fetched, but I would have liked to seen him possibly get carried off the field. That's just me, because of, like I said, what he's done for college football, and that he's had a pretty respectable career, that he hasn't really pissed off any of his peers or anything like that. But again, he's not the type of person that media people would kind of flock to, because honestly, just to be totally honest, some of his press conferences were kind of boring. He's not that type of personality. He's more of, let's take care of business and do what we need to do. But he's probably the last breed of the type of coach he was, that he felt like you didn't need to get all these to load your team up with a bunch of 5-star guys, that he could take 2 stars, and by the end of their time, they'd turn them into decent football players. That was his mindset, and obviously that mindset is a dying mindset in college football. But still, I feel like the career he had, the longevity that he had doing it, and now that time is over at Georgia Tech, and moving on to the next guy. But I thought that wish there could have been. I wish Paul Johnson could have gone off on a positive note, and I thought they were going to win that game just because of that. Because usually momentum can ride whatever talent you have in some moments, but it just didn't happen for the Yellow Jackets, unfortunately. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is our show. And just want to thank David Berger, Steve Choi, for being on the show today. Now, what I'm asking, guys, is I'm asking for your help. Because we need help. We need help to get this thing out there, to get it more exposure. And the way you can do that is, if you're listening on iTunes, if you could give us a 5-star thing where they have the 5 stars, would appreciate that. If you could write us a good review, we also would appreciate that. That'll help us get more exposure and get this show out there, especially people that are looking for something different, looking for something better than sports radio. Or 680 The Fan, get tired of 680 The Fan, get tired of 92.9 The Game. Well, I feel like this is a happy medium. So be sure to do that. Be sure to subscribe to Podbean, subscribe to iTunes, Spotify, Google Play. You don't have to subscribe to all those, but I would like that if you did. But But if you could hit that subscribe button, that will help us out tremendously. Also, like us on social media, wherever you see us. That would also help us out. So definitely need your guys' help with that. And we appreciate you listening today, especially if you're listening to this part. Hopefully you had fun with all the Sugar Bowl talk. So hope you guys have a great New Year's. Happy New Year's, because I'm assuming the majority of you guys are probably going to listen to this in the new year. And take care of each other out there. I know New Year's can be crazy. Always take Uber or rideshare or something like that. So, episode 13 is out.